Just 1 minute ago, everything changed. A royal insider has leaked a voice message allegedly recorded in secret Camilla's voice, unmistakable, dripping with venom and calculation. In it, she confesses a plan so dark it could unravel the monarchy itself. The world has heard rumors, but this is something far more sinister. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The leak dropped without warning an anonymous message to a seasoned royal journalist, one who'd been on the palace's blacklist for years. Attached was a single audio file, barely 2 minutes long, but enough to send shockwaves across every royal corridor. The voice was clear. It didn't require confirmation. Camilla's tone was deliberate, her words sharpened with intent. What began as a muttered complaint twisted quickly into something far more unsettling, a raw and unfiltered confession of manipulation. She spoke not as a queen but as a strategist. In just moments, she hinted at calculated decisions meant to sideline, divide, and dismantle anyone she viewed as a threat, including senior royals by blood. Palace officials reportedly sprang into immediate action, trying to trace the origin of the leak, attempting to silence the wildfire before it burned through public trust. But it was too late. Social media was already ablaze, dissecting every syllable. The word rage became the buzzword. Sources claim the message was recorded during a private moment of fury, where Camilla dropped her polished exterior and exposed a glimpse of the woman behind the crown. Some phrases were clipped, but what remained was damning. Lines like "they were never meant to rise," and "I warned them what would happen" turned speculation into fear. Whispers of betrayal no longer sounded like distant rumors, they echoed as truth. As major outlets scrambled to verify authenticity, what followed was silence from the palace, a silence that, in the world of royals, speaks louder than denial. No legal threats, no official statements, just locked doors and tight lips, which only fueled public intrigue. Analysts speculated that the voice message could have come from an ongoing internal power struggle. Some insiders hinted it wasn't just a recording, it was a warning. The question lingered. If this was just one moment of anger caught on tape, what else had been said? And what actions had already been set into motion? In the hours that followed, it became clear this was more than a media scandal. It was an unraveling of trust, of image, and perhaps of legacy. People weren't just reacting to the words. They were questioning how long this had been happening under their noses. How many conversations had gone unrecorded? How many decisions had been made behind the walls of the palace, not for the monarchy's preservation but for personal conquest? But to understand the weight of this voice message, we need to step back into the hidden world of royal rivalries and the long simmering power plays behind palace doors. For years, Camilla moved like a shadow, never crowned in name, but steadily rising in power. Her alliances were discreet, her influence subtle, but unmistakable. This wasn't just a love story with Charles. This was a campaign. And now, insiders are speaking of a plan that may have always been in motion. Long before she was draped in royal titles or granted a queen's platform, Camilla was dismissed, mocked, even despised by the very institution she would later command. The public rejection following Diana's tragic rise made her persona non grata in the eyes of the nation. She was the outsider who had dared to remain clinging to her position beside the man who was never supposed to marry her. But instead of retreating, she endured. And in that endurance, she learned. Slowly, she began to recalibrate. Each public appearance, each softened headline, each carefully chosen, caused none of it accidental. As the years passed, her return into the royal fold seemed less like a forgiveness story and more like a recalculated entry into the game she never stopped playing. Those close to the palace describe a woman who understood influence was never handed, it was cultivated. Every major state occasion saw Camilla closer to Charles, no longer just present but positioned. She whispered not just affection but opinion. She reshaped events with subtle shifts, ensuring her presence was not only accepted but necessary. Where others saw coincidence, palace watchers now claim coordination. Behind closed doors, Camilla reportedly took an active interest in matters of legacy, particularly surrounding the crown's future, and who would control the messaging behind it. Her conversations often turned to succession, branding, and the importance of securing a royal narrative that didn't relegate her to the sidelines. But not everyone embraced this evolution. The tension with other senior royals grew steadily behind the scenes. Catherine, with her poised elegance and global admiration, was viewed as a natural heir to the monarchy's modern image. Anne, fiercely loyal and unimpressed by titles alone, reportedly remained distant and skeptical of Camilla's true motivations. There were subtle slight seating arrangements, schedule conflicts, divided patronages, but according to new sources, those were not just internal miscommunications. They were strategies. And now, with the leaked voice message spreading like wildfire, the subtext becomes text. In one chilling portion, Camilla is heard saying, "There's no such thing as a coincidence in this family. If I didn't place myself there, I would have been erased." That sentence alone has turned quiet suspicion into undeniable realization. This wasn't a quiet reintegration, it was a calculated return. A re-entry with purpose. Not to accompany the throne, but to shape it. But while Camilla climbed, others within the palace saw warning signs, none more than the woman the message targets most viciously. The voice message contains one name repeated with chilling venom: Catherine. The Princess of Wales has long been seen as the future of the monarchy, graceful, adored, and unshakable. But now, we learn Camilla may have viewed her not as a family member, but as a rival to be crushed. From the moment Catherine stepped into the royal spotlight, she captured something Camilla never could: universal adoration. The public didn't merely accept her, they embraced her. Her elegance, her devotion to duty, her steady presence in a family torn by controversy, she embodied the very qualities that the modern monarchy desperately needed. In private circles, many began referring to her not just as William's wife, but as the monarchy's true north. That status came with weight, and Camilla, already navigating the bitter currents of comparison to Diana, reportedly saw it as a threat she could no longer ignore. According to insiders, Charles himself began leaning into Catherine's influence, often seeking her counsel on engagements, charities, and public image. For Camilla, this was more than uncomfortable, it was destabilizing. She had fought for legitimacy, and now, it seemed, her place was quietly being eclipsed by a younger, more favored figure. The rift between the two women, though concealed from the public, was real. Those closest to the palace recall subtle tensions, Camilla's cold glances during public appearances, unexpected changes in event schedules that pushed Catherine out of the spotlight, and briefings that praised one while minimizing the other. But what was once whispered is now spoken aloud, thanks to the damning voice message. In it, Camilla's tone shifts when she mentions Catherine. "She was never meant to outshine me," she says, her voice tight with resentment. The phrase has ignited a storm because it was never meant to be heard. That sentence doesn't imply rivalry, it implies intent. According to palace aides, there were moments when Catherine found herself quietly excluded from key gatherings or informed of decisions after the fact. It wasn't overt warfare, it was erosion. Slow, deliberate, isolating. Some believe this was Camilla's way of weakening Catherine's influence without causing visible conflict. But the message changes everything. It validates what many suspected, that Camilla wasn't just threatened, she was actively working to limit Catherine's ascent. And the root of it wasn't just envy. It was fear. Fear that history would repeat itself. That once again, a radiant, beloved princess would define the face of the monarchy while Camilla, yet again, faded into the margins. The deepest irony lies in what Camilla may have feared most, that Catherine would restore Diana's legacy by simply being herself. With every headline calling Catherine the people's princess, with every charity she championed and every child she comforted, that legacy grew. And Camilla, still haunted by the past, saw not just a daughter-in-law, but a symbol of what she could never undo. And in that light, the voice message isn't just bitter, it's tragic. But Catherine wasn't the only one in Camilla's path. The message hints at a plan involving someone even closer to the throne. The voice message reveals a tactic that chilled insiders to their core: divide and isolate. According to the leak, Camilla may have deliberately driven a wedge between Charles and William, all to ensure her hold on power. If true, it wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was strategic sabotage. The relationship between Charles and William, once defined by a delicate mixture of duty and affection, has over the years become increasingly complicated. From the outside, the public saw staged smiles and official unity, but within the palace walls, subtle fractures widened in silence. Those close to the inner circle now suggest that Camilla may have played a pivotal role in deepening those cracks not by accident, but by design. According to one royal aide, Camilla began quietly influencing Charles's perception of his eldest son during pivotal moments in the monarchy's transition. In conversations she believed would remain private, she allegedly questioned William's temperament, his ability to lead, and whether the crown would remain stable in his hands. The leaked voice message includes the chilling line, "He's not ready." And he never will be. That sentence wasn't just a critique, it was a declaration of intent. Over time, this whisper campaign appears to have had consequences. Charles began hesitating on decisions that once seemed obvious. William's increasing requests for clearer roles and authority were met with delays. Events that should have solidified his path as the heir were stalled, reshaped, or handed to others. Meetings were rescheduled. Communication lines went quiet. And behind each of these moments, according to insiders, was Camilla's steady influence guiding Charles toward distrust, caution, and eventually, distance. The consequences were devastating. William, known for his composure, became more guarded, more removed. Tensions began to seep through even the most carefully orchestrated public appearances. Observers noted the lack of eye contact, the rehearsed but hollow interactions. It was no longer just a generational gap, it was a political divide. Those close to William reportedly began to suspect that key opportunities were being deliberately rerouted. Initiatives he was passionate about received lukewarm backing. Important duties were withheld without clear reason. And the more William pressed for clarity, the more strained his relationship with his father became. Camilla, meanwhile, maintained her image as a supportive wife, standing beside Charles, offering advice in private. But the voice message changes that perception entirely. It strips away the illusion and reveals a calculated effort to reshape the power dynamic at the very top. A quiet sabotage rooted in control, fear, and ambition. What's most alarming is that this isn't just about two men falling out, it's about succession, legacy, and the stability of the crown itself. If Charles could be swayed to doubt the very future of the monarchy in his own son, what else could be manipulated? The public now begins to question whether decisions made in the past few years were truly in the interest of the institution, or simply part of a long game played behind palace doors. But the voice recording contains more than just bitter words, it references an actual plan, one that has left even seasoned insiders stunned. If there's one part of the voice message that ignited fury across the globe, it was this. Camilla allegedly speaks of cleansing the legacy that still looms over the monarchy, Princess Diana's legacy. Not only is this shocking, it borders on historical erasure. The words landed like a bombshell. Diana's shadow will not remain over this family forever. It was a phrase soaked in finality, dripping with the kind of intent that could never be passed off as a casual remark. This wasn't just about moving forward, it was about rewriting what came before. And in a monarchy where memory is sacred, Camilla's words struck at the very heart of the institution's moral compass. The leaked message goes further, allegedly outlining desires to quietly remove tributes, trim down the presence of Diana's image in official spaces, and subtly shift the narrative surrounding the people's princess. It wasn't direct destruction, it was calculated dilution. And that, to many, felt more dangerous. Behind the palace gates, this so-called rebranding wasn't new. Over the last few years, changes had already been noticed by those paying close attention. A memorial that once had fresh flowers each week quietly fell into routine neglect. A photo that once stood behind Charles during interviews was swapped out for a neutral royal crest. Subtle, but symbolic. Now, with the voice recording exposed, these actions are being re-examined under a different lens, a darker one. What was once assumed to be administrative oversight now seems orchestrated. And the public, still fiercely protective of Diana's legacy, erupted with outrage. Reports soon emerged that William was not only blindsided, but absolutely enraged. Aides close to the prince say he had no prior knowledge of these subtle removals, nor the quiet conversations surrounding the repackaging of royal history. For a son who still speaks of his mother in the present tense, who has dedicated his public life to causes she once championed, this was more than a betrayal, it was a direct attack on the very foundation of his identity. It was a wound reopened. According to one insider, William confronted several senior aides behind closed doors and demanded full transparency. What he uncovered left him stunned and reportedly more distant from Camilla than ever before. Camilla's resentment of Diana is no secret. The comparisons have followed her from the moment she stepped into public life. In interview after interview, she's been forced to walk in the echoes of a woman the world never stopped loving. But what was once passive bitterness now appears to have transformed into quiet retaliation. And the world is no longer silent. Public reaction has been visceral. Social media exploded with heartbreak, betrayal, and fury. Former supporters of Camilla's redemption arc have withdrawn. Major networks are re-airing Diana documentaries, and newspapers around the world are questioning how far this cleansing may have already gone without scrutiny. But the shock doesn't end with what was said. It deepens with how and by whom it was heard. Because now, as outrage grows, the question arises who recorded this message, and why now? The voice didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone leaked it, and whoever did may have destroyed their royal career or worse. Who was brave enough to defy Camilla from within? And why would they risk their future to expose this moment? Inside the palace, trust has always been currency. It's not given lightly. And once broken, it's nearly impossible to reclaim. That's why the leak of Camilla's voice message sent more than just shockwaves through the media. It triggered a full-blown internal crisis. According to insiders, the palace launched an immediate investigation, not just to stop the spread of the message, but to uncover the person who dared to release it. Whispers began to circulate about a royal staff member, someone with access not just to private spaces, but to moments of vulnerability. Speculation quickly narrowed to a personal assistant or a member of the close protection team, someone who'd been in the room during confidential conversations. Someone overlooked, yet always watching. But this wasn't the act of a traitor seeking fame. Those who've served the royal household understand the cost of betrayal. It wasn't a calculated career move, it was a breaking point. Reports suggest the individual had been emotionally torn for months, quietly observing the widening cracks behind the palace fade. Perhaps it was the relentless tension between senior royals, or the growing moral burden of watching one narrative flourish while others were buried. Some believe it was a moment of conscience sparked not by anger, but by sorrow. A need to restore truth in a place where manipulation had become second nature. There were signs, in hindsight, red flags that now seem glaring. 2 sudden resignations within the inner staff circle. An unexpected reassignment of a longtime aide. Hushed departures with no explanation. The kind of changes that were once dismissed as internal restructuring now appear part of a deeper effort to tighten the circle too little, too late. Surveillance has reportedly intensified since the leak. Personal devices are now restricted. Rooms are swept daily. Even veteran staff members are being watched, questioned, and in some cases, quietly removed from their roles. The palace, once a place of tradition and structure, is now gripped by paranoia. And that fear? It's contagious. Everyone within the walls knows that if one recording slipped through, there could be more. The unspoken rules of silence and loyalty have been shattered. Whispers are met with suspicion. Long-standing alliances are fraying under pressure. Even those not directly involved fear the consequences of being too close, or too informed. Because in a system built on hierarchy and secrecy, the exposure of even one truth has the power to unravel everything. And yet, as investigators close in and the palace locks its doors tighter than ever, the story refuses to settle. The leak wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because just as the palace scrambles to contain the damage, another bombshell lands. The message may not be the only one. Sources now suggest that this wasn't an isolated recording. There may be more. If Camilla's private thoughts were recorded over months or years, what else has she admitted? The palace isn't just fighting one fire. It may be facing an inferno. The initial leak cracked the royal facade, but now whispers of a larger archive threaten to bring it all down. According to insiders, the voice message was never a one-off, it was part of a broader collection, hidden on a secure drive, kept by someone who may have spent years collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. The implications are staggering. If this is true, then the message that shocked the world was merely the first ember in a blaze that could burn through decades of manufactured stability. And the clues were always there. In the original leak, Camilla makes a fleeting remark, just like I told you last month, a passing line that now reads like a breadcrumb to something far greater. It implies continuity, a pattern, and most damning of all, intent. The idea that other recordings exist has sent the palace into a panic. Legal teams have reportedly been mobilized across multiple countries, attempting to track down, suppress, or legally restrain any individual or outlet that might come into possession of these files. Sources claim international news agencies, especially in the US and Australia, have already been approached with shadowy offers, teasers, even threats dangling the possibility of exclusive content. And with each passing hour, the fear intensifies. If these recordings cover royal tours, private dinners, late-night calls, then no moment is safe. The past few years are now under review, not by historians, but by lawyers and crisis managers scrambling to protect what little remains unscathed. Meanwhile, Camilla's public appearances have taken a dramatic turn. Once confident and composed, she's now under a lens sharper than ever before. Every word, every gesture, every glance is dissected by a world wondering what else she might be hiding. Royal observers note the sudden tightening of press access, the abrupt cancellations, the forced smiles that seem less like diplomacy and more like desperation. The pressure is mounting not just on Camilla, but on the monarchy as a whole. What began as a private misstep has metastasized into an institutional reckoning. Even loyalists within the palace are beginning to falter. There's a sense of dread, not just about what may surface, but about how much longer the walls of silence can hold. One insider described it as a slow collapse, where every attempt to stop the fallout only confirms how deep the damage goes. And in the court of public opinion, every delay, every evasive comment, only fuels the belief that something far worse is waiting to be unearthed. But even as the palace deploys every tactic to contain the fallout, the damage has already begun to reshape the monarchy's future. They haven't spoken publicly. But behind palace gates, William and Catherine's reaction was far from silent. Those closest to the couple described shock, hurt, and a chilling determination to never let this happen again. The moment the recording surfaced, everything shifted. It wasn't just an attack on the monarchy, it was personal. For William, hearing Camilla's voice twist history, belittle his wife, and undermine the memory of his mother was a line crossed so severely that even the palace's seasoned mediators couldn't find words to soften it. According to insiders, William was scheduled to meet Charles just days after the leak. He didn't show. No warning, no explanation. Only silence. And in the world of royal diplomacy, silence speaks volumes. It was the clearest signal yet that the bond between father and son had reached a breaking point, one that words alone could no longer repair. Catherine, typically the embodiment of calm resilience, withdrew almost immediately. For 48 hours, she canceled all appearances, including a private engagement she had never missed in over a decade. Behind the scenes, aides say she was deeply affected not by the accusations or the political fallout, but by the emotional venom embedded in Camilla's words. The tone, the bitterness, the intent. It wasn't just jealousy, it was cruelty. And for Catherine, who had spent years quietly upholding the family's unity in public, it was a betrayal that stripped away any remaining illusion of solidarity. Within their inner circle, the response was swift and deliberate. No outbursts, no public spectacle. But a fortress began to rise around the couple. Advisors and friends closed ranks. Leaks were shut down. Briefings were frozen. Loyalty was measured in silence. Those who remained were the ones trusted to see the long game, the slow and quiet repositioning of the future. Because in the days that followed, the conversations behind closed doors began to shift. Not just about damage control, but about acceleration, about what comes next. For years, William and Catherine had waited, watched, and supported the institution through scandal after scandal. But now, according to one insider, that patience is gone. The question is no longer if the torch will be passed, but how soon. And if there was any doubt about their mindset, one quote erased it. In a private moment overheard by a staffer, Catherine reportedly said, "It's not just words, it's war." The statement has since echoed through palace halls like a warning. Because when the usually composed Princess of Wales speaks with such finality, it signals something far more dangerous than fury. It signals resolve. Not just to defend reputation, but to protect the future from being manipulated, buried, or rewritten. Now, with the monarchy's image teetering and the public demanding answers, one final question remains: what will Charles do? For Charles, this is no longer about marriage. It's about monarchy. The man who fought for Camilla for decades is now being asked to consider the unthinkable public distancing. Behind closed doors, pressure mounts. Will he stand by his queen or his kingdom? The throne is heavy not just with tradition but with consequence. And now, with a nation watching and a family fracturing, Charles is at a crossroads no king ever wants to face. His advisors are sharply divided. On one side stand those who believe in preserving personal loyalty at all costs, the courtiers who remind him of Camilla's decades-long journey, the years she stood in the shadows, the ridicule she endured. They argue that to turn his back on her now would not only be cruel, it would be cowardly. But on the other side, voices grow louder, more desperate. They argue that this is no longer about personal history. It is about the survival of the monarchy's credibility. And with public opinion turning venomous, protecting Camilla may mean sacrificing the very institution Charles swore to uphold. The conversations have taken a sharp turn. No longer about damage control but optics. Perception. Strategy. There is serious, coordinated talk about a temporary separation. Not legally, not permanently, but publicly. A gesture to cool the storm. To show that the king hears the nation's outrage and is willing to act in its interest. The very idea has reportedly sent Camilla into a fury. Sources say she blames not just the leaker, but palace operatives who, in her view, never fully accepted her and are now using this scandal to sideline her once and for all. And Charles? He is paralyzed, trapped between a love he sacrificed everything for and a crown that demands sacrifice in return. Friends say he has grown withdrawn, tormented by sleepless nights and internal battles no one can resolve for him. He remembers the decades he spent defending Camilla against a world that never forgave her. But he also knows this moment is different. The silence of William. The retreat of Catherine. The collapse of public confidence. They're not isolated reactions, they're signals. The monarchy isn't just in danger of embarrassment, it's in danger of erosion. Polls have reflected the change. Support for Camilla has plummeted to historic lows. Newspapers once cautiously sympathetic now run editorials questioning her role entirely. The pressure to respond, and respond decisively, has reached a boiling point. The palace is drafting a final statement carefully worded, painfully dissected. It's expected to be read by Charles himself. And what it contains or omits will speak volumes. Will he defend her? Distance himself? Remain vague in hopes the storm passes? Every sentence will be a judgment call. Every pause a political message. And for a man raised to preserve the monarchy, this may be the most defining moment of his reign. As the kingdom holds its breath, one thing is clear: this was more than a leak. It was an earthquake. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.